So we're going to talk about the ins and outs of a sulfur valve today. More often than not, we get calls back to the office that a driver has experienced some type of issue with their valve, colder temperatures especially, but still happens obviously in the warmer temperatures as well. What we have here is exactly that. This is a working model of a sulfur valve that you'll find on pretty much all of our trailers. This one has actually been extracted from the tank. So as you can see by the slit right here, this is where it would actually mount into the barrel. A couple of things with sulfur valves that are confused often that we run into is that a packing leak will cause a valve failure, meaning that your discharge, or this section of the valve, will be filled with sulfur. Packing issues will not cause that. Typically what will cause that is it's a problem with the actual valve itself in terms of its sealing face. We look inside, you have your retaining disc, and then you actually have a Teflon washer of sorts. That's what seals your valve from your tank. More often than not, what happens is something will get caught in this section, causing the valve not to seat. When you load the trailer, this is where your leak comes from. This is why doing a cap test during loading is so important, because this is where you're going to catch that failure. Just open the valve to demonstrate how this functions. So we spin the valve stem out. Your valve is now in the open position, meaning product can flow through down out to your discharge and out to your discharge line. If you experience issues with opening the valve, as mentioned, especially in colder temperatures, chances are it's probably frozen. So what that means is that there's product that is actually solidified against this sealing surface. You try to open your valve, it doesn't move. At that point, your best option is steam. Minimum you should be steaming for is at least 15 minutes to half an hour, especially in colder temperatures. If you've been experienced to a delay of any sort in getting that product to the offload facility, there is the possibility that inside the tank you've actually formed what we call a heel. What a heel is that's where product actually builds up in front of your discharge. Steaming the valve alone will not solve that problem. You also have to steam the main coil of the tank. Alternating between both gives you the greatest chance of success at getting the trailer offloaded. Talk about the parts of the valve now. We're just going to take it apart. That way everybody has an idea of what's what. First off, you have your clamp. I have seen in the past where these clamps will actually leak. The reason for that is the clamp is not physically tight enough. Something that you should be checking when you pick up a trailer, open the doors, have a look inside. It gives you a good idea of what you're dealing with right from the word go. If you notice that there's sulfur either dripping from here down along this portion or dripping inside of your packing area, that's usually a good indication that there is a leak and you should probably not take that trailer. Back to the clamp. If you notice sulfur dripping down here, typically this is the cause. It's your clamp. Tighten it. These clamps are actually marked. It says very specifically hand tighten only. There's a good reason for that. The reason why that's indicated on there is these clamps are actually beveled. So if you put a wrench or a pair of pliers or something else on there to tighten this clamp, essentially what's going to happen is you're going to widen this bevel here. When that happens, your bonnet is not going to seal into the valve. We'll explain that further in a moment here. This will be something that only a field supervisor will do in the field when it comes to removing a clamp. Obviously, safety first. We don't want any product spilling out. For our demonstration purposes, we're going to disassemble this here so that everybody can have a look. So this is your sealing face that we were talking about earlier. This is what essentially blocks any product from getting into the discharge. These Teflon discs can become worn. When that happens, it's time for them to be changed out. We'll know right away, typically in those situations, as the discharge of the unit will become full continuously, meaning more than one load. Starting at the top, you have what's called a crust breaker spike. You won't see these in a lot of our trailers, as we did try them for a while. We've discovered that actually in some instances they can be more of a hindrance than they can a help. So typically you will not see this. There is some trailers that still have them on very specific runs. I'm going to disassemble this. So the next portion that you're going to see is the valve stem. This is your valve stem here. Your valve stem actually travels through the bonnet and through your packing. So as I turn, you'll see the stem actually travel through. Typically these stems are long life. The problem that we run into is if there's a packing leak on the trailer, what will happen, and you can see the ridges inside, you'll end up with this little spiral. What's happened there is sulfur is built up in the packing and solidified. Sulfur is very abrasive, so as this valve is open, that sulfur is actually cutting into the face of that valve stem. That's where your packing leaks come from. That's what causes the issues that you'll see with packing. Is that repairable? No, it's not. Once they've become pitted like this, basically this valve stem is no longer usable. We're going to thread that out. Now you can see the ridges a little bit better. Unfortunately, to get anything to seal against that is going to be pretty tough. Next we're going to discuss is the packing. This is your packing retainer. Essentially, this is what is used to hold the packing in place and snug it up. You'll hear dispatch often refer to, hey, check the packing, make sure it isn't leaking, or if there is a bit of a drip, snug it up a bit. As a reference, the distance from your bonnet to your packing retainer should be approximately 3/8 of an inch. Typically when you see these in the field, there'll be two nuts, one tight to the packing retainer, one above, which is a locking nut. The purpose for that is to keep these from backing off due to vibration. If you're checking the packing on your trailer and you open the doors and you discover that this packing retainer is actually pretty much touching your bonnet, that packing is no longer usable and should be changed out. Again, this is something that will be done by somebody from the maintenance team or a field supervisor. This is what your packing retainer looks like. If you noticed, it's beveled. The packing that goes in is beveled as well. That's what helps it to compress. It's kind of tough to see, but that's your packing right there. Essentially, it's a set of bellows, and as you tighten it, it compresses to become a formed seal. Over time, it will wear. So here's some examples of packing. This one's packing that's come out of a valve. This valve was actually, basically the packing was over tightened. You notice the difference between how compressed it is versus new packing. You notice the inside of this packing, there actually is bits of dried sulfur in there, indicating that this packing has failed. Here's an example of a complete sulfur valve. This one has been rebuilt. The only piece missing from this, and obviously for demonstration purposes we've left it off, is the stainless steel cotter key that holds these two pieces together. The purpose of that cotter key is so that you don't damage the bonnet and the valve face. We've run into instances where people have put hammer handles and various other items, pipe wrenches and such, trying to force a valve. At that point, what will happen, this cotter key will actually shear. It's meant to do that. Helps to protect the components. Under no circumstances should anybody ever place a pipe wrench or a hammer handle or any other such device on the valve stem or in the handle of the valve. That should be something that's left to a field supervisor if the situation should warrant. If we look at the stem on this valve, there's no ridges. It's completely clear. This is a brand new stem, but this is what they should look like. There shouldn't be any pitting or any ridges on them. Teflon disc assembly, again, this one has been used, but there's no ridges. Over tightening a valve. This is something that we need to speak of as well. The reason why is if you over tighten a valve, what happens is it compresses this section here and can essentially bend it. Going back to what we were talking about with forcing it with a pipe wrench, whether it be open or closed. What'll happen is this piece bends, you'll go to close your sulfur valve, this will not sit flush to the inside, meaning that you have the probability of a leak. That is the basic workings.